Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please, please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. Our lecture today is titled Problems and Prospects of the United Nations Organization. Problems and prospects of the United Nations Organization. Now, the United Nations was officially established on the 24th of October 1945 following the inability of the League of Nations to prevent the outbreak of the Second World War. After the Second World War that lasted from 1939 to 1945, world leaders were perturbed by the level of insecurity and the wide range of devastation caused by the two major wars. The necessary move towards the establishment of the UN started with the Atlantic Charter, which was signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt of the United States and Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Great Britain. The major reason the UN was established is to promote international cooperation and to promote international cooperation. Now let us look at the major objectives of the UN. What are the objectives of the UN? Number one is to maintain international order. To maintain international order, that's number one. Number two, to promote friendly political, economic, and cultural relations. Number three, to ensure fundamental human rights. Number four, to promote peaceful global atmosphere. Number five, to promote international cooperation. You understand? To promote international cooperation. Okay, now let us look at the organs, the various organs of the UN. What are the various organs of the UN? Number one organ is the General Assembly. That is the UN General Assembly, what some people call the UNGA. Number two, the Security Council. Number three, Economic and Social Council. Number four, Trusteeship Council. Number five, International Court of Justice. Then number six, the Secretariat. Now, let us look at the challenges or the problems of the UN. What are the challenges of the UN? Number one challenge is the challenge of conformity. Sometimes the powerful countries have, violate the United Nations decisions in a bid to pursuing their foreign policies and achieving national interest. This has knocked out the UN in the area of conflict prevention. For instance, the case of the US invasion of Iraq was against the UN desire. So that is number one problem. Number two problem is inadequate representation of states. Inadequate representation of states is another problem or another challenge of the UN. Now, the same five countries, which are the US, Britain, Russia, China, and France, have been the power player since 1945. The inequality of representation in the UN Security Council has made few nations more powerful than the others. Okay, so of course that is actually another challenge. Another challenge is the inability to prevent wars. Okay, the UN was established to prevent wars and ensure member states abide by the principle of peaceful, means of settling disputes. However, unfortunately, the international system has experienced various wars, conflicts, uprisings, and terrorism, which have claimed millions of lives and endangered peace and security around the world. Okay, so that is actually another problem. Another problem is the overbearing attitude of of the Security Council. Now, the Security Council is an organ that actually assumes the primary responsibility in maintaining international peace and security. It determines whether a situation constitutes a threat to peace, breach to peace, and of course, aggression. However, it did not determine the aggression when Iraq invaded Kuwait. Another problem or another challenge is lack of adherence to the judgment of the ICJ, that's International Court of Justice. Now, the decision of the ICJ are sometimes weakened by the powers that be. Now, examples of such kind of judgments that have been weakened, okay, is the judgment in the case between the US and Guantanamo Bay. Okay, the second judgment that has actually the second judgment that has not been followed, and that has actually weakened the ICJ is the one between Britain and Argentina over Falkland Island, among others, that have not been respected by the big powers. Now, let us look at the achievements now. What are the prospects of the UN? The prospects of the United Nations organizations can be seen from the following perspectives. Number one, prevention of another world war. One of the major objectives of the UN is the maintenance of world peace. To a large extent, the UN has prevented the outbreak of another world war. This is being achieved through arms control and disarmament, imposition of sanctions, and peacekeeping mission where there is a war. That's number one. Number two, improvement of the economic well-being of the less developed countries. Over the years, the UN has helped to improve, the UN has helped to improve the economic well-being of nation states that perceived, or that are perceived as less developed through foreign aids, loans, and grants under the auspices of the UNDP, World Bank, and other international financial institutions within the UN. Number two is independence, for the nations under colonialism. Now, the UN has encouraged independence through self-determination, which is one of the reasons it was set up. The wave of independence ended with the gaining of independence by Polo in 1994 from the US. It was the last trust territory under the Trusteeship Council. Number four, improvement of the living standard of international community. In the area of improving the standard of living of the people in the global community, the United Nations introduced the MDGs and, of course, the SDGs as we have it today. Apart from that, it has helped the victims of various wars, famine, and natural disasters. The UNICEF and WHO are not left out also in improving the health condition of the people. So those are just the major achievements of the United Nations organizations. So it is imperative for us to understand that the United Nations organization has actually been set up, majorly for peaceful purposes, to maintain peace and international cooperation. And what has happened is that whether we like it or not, there have been some achievements and there have been some problems, of the United Nations organizations. If not for anything, the UN has actually achieved some, they have actually made some inroads into making peace, achieving peace and security in the world. And to some extent, of course, there are still certain major challenges that is still besetting, or that the UN is still being faced with. And these challenges I've actually mentioned already. Thank you very much.